Hey everyone, welcome back to the POTA Performers part of our YouTube channel. I'm Stuart, Victor Echo 9, Charlie Foxtrot, and welcome to the show. And today I have a really good, well, I call him the voice of Alaska. You know, the Alaska beacon, whatever terminology you want to use. Mike AL7KC joins us today from the Fairbanks, Alaska area. Mike, hey, nice to put a face to the name finally.
Hi, Stuart. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Yeah, I've gotten to see your face before because I've watched some of your videos previously, and thank you for having me on. I appreciate the honor.
Yeah, well, it's
And
great to have
and
Pete DeGraff on.
I would say that I really shouldn't be classified as the voice of Alaska. I'm one of them, but Paul NL7 Victor, he probably should be reserved for that title because he's the number one Alaska hunter guy and has been for a long time.
Well, maybe one day we'll have the honor to get a hold of Paul and get him on here as well. And he and you guys, we could debate that. We could debate that title. Anyways, Mike, thanks for coming on the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got, just your overall, where you came from, all the good stuff about your life, and then how you got into ham radio.
Oh, that's an awful open-ended question there. Well, let's see. I was career military in the Air Force, and I got my ticket during that time frame back in 1984. So it's been 42 years now. I've been a ham. I was prepping for this when you were invited me on. I was looking at that, and I was like, it doesn't seem like it's been that long. But anyway, I had been interested in ham radio since my CB days. I was a CBer as a grade schooler, and then as a teen. And I enjoyed radio back then, but I didn't really get around hams enough, I guess, and there wasn't enough exposure. I tried to get my ham license sooner. Actually had a teacher at one of the schools that I went to that started a class, and we met once or twice, and then he canceled it, said he didn't have time. A little bit mind-boggling to me why I started if you're not going to follow through and finish. But anyway, that was when I was junior in high school. So anyway, I didn't get my license until a few years later when I was in the Air Force and things kind of lined up better. I got around a bunch of hams over in Korea, got involved in Air Force Mars and was running phone patches for people. And pretty much everybody else that was doing that was hams. So I got to actually see them operating. It was kind of interesting to be able to get a exposure. I one Saturday I remember I was driving by the Mars station on my bicycle and I saw somebody was over there because it was right not far from the gate. I was in Osan, Korea at the time. I went over to see what was going on, and he had his rig set up instead of the normal KWM2s that were in use. He had his Kenwood set up. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was a Kenwood. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. It was like a 120 or 130, TS 120 or 130 that he had set up there. And he was having a conversation with somebody, and I'm sitting there watching the meter, and it's S9 plus, and he's running off of one of the dipoles that the Mars station had there that were up in the air pretty decently. And turned out he was talking to a guy that was in Atlanta, Georgia, who was driving in his vehicle. And I'm looking at this and listening to this. I was like, I gotta do this. So that planted the seeds. That was in the early 80s. And later on, I got back stateside and was living in Ohio over Dayton, Beaver Creek area. I started looking for a rig, and I found myself a used Kenwood TS520 that was for sale in the paper. Because back then, you didn't have the internet, so you had to find stuff in the paper or know somebody. And I got a decent deal on that and got started listening, and then shortly after ended up was in tech school for ground radio maintenance, and mentioned at the beginning of the class when we were going around talking about each other and doing intros that I was interested in getting my ham license, and one of the other guys chimed in and said he wanted to too. And that day we started working on getting our licenses. And that was back in the days when you had to drive to the FCC office. So I was in Mississippi at that time and had to drive to Louisiana to New Orleans to be able to get our license exam taken care of. That was a little bit of an adventure. It's a lot nicer now not having to do all that stuff where you got volunteer examiners and most communities or even online now where you can get your license. It's so much more convenient. But anyway, I got in on that, and shortly thereafter I was stationed at a combat comm unit for the Air Force, and my job was running HF long haul. So that worked out nice to be able to kind of pair my hobby up along what I was doing for work. I was a, maintenance tech. We would end up going out and building the antennas and setting up the systems to be able to get on, and then we'd end up establishing circuits for other guys, the actual operators to run them and do point to point between us and wherever the other location was going to be that time. And that varied depending on the timing. So anyway, I used to get on. We had a big Collins system that was 2.5 kW. I'd dial it back and get on the ham bands and try the antennas out and make sure they worked, of course. Yeah, back then we were using a lot of 500-foot sloping long wires and vertical half rhombics for antennas most of the time. That got me a bunch of experience and exposure for propagation and seeing what was going on. I got some good training because got to go to a HF planning and engineering course that the Air Force had to be able to teach you more about how the propagation worked and the frequencies and the stuff that goes along with that. We ended up having some ionosounds that we used along the way to be able to check and see what frequencies actually worked on the paths that we were doing, which kind of takes a lot of the guesswork out of wondering which frequency is going to work for you. And some of that technology now is available for pretty much everybody if you tap into it, because there's a bunch of those on the air around the different places around the world. So that can be a helpful thing. And let's see, I did 20 years as a tech in the Air Force. And then when I separated out, I got a job in telecom and worked another 23 years doing telecommunications technician work, where I worked in a central office environment doing work on telephone switches and building circuits for T1s and Ethernet and fiber optic systems, keeping them going, and for all around Alaska for a
So
while.
did you end up in Alaska from from the military? Did the military
Yeah,
take you up to Alaska?
yes. I volunteered to come to Alaska. I had flown through here on my way to Korea and was sitting in the airport in Anchorage looking at the mountains and how beautiful it was, and just was thinking, I got to come back here. And when I was down in my tech school in Mississippi, I met up with another gentleman who, if you've been on the air for a long time, may or may not know. And his name's Ed, and his call is Kilo Lima 7 Hotel Romeo November, or as he says it, uh, Kilo Lima 7 um, Hotel Radio Norway, like he usually uses. But anyway, he's a 20-meter only guy normally, and maybe getting on some of the evening nets on other bands, but generally find him on 20. He's a big DXer. Not much for POTA, but anyway, I met him. He was going through a school also down there at the same time, and he was talking about Alaska all the time and how great it was. And he was an ex-Californian who disowned Alaska or disowned California and came to after coming to Alaska. And
Seems to be a lot of those Californians moving out of California these days.
yeah, they're fleeing in droves. Yeah, my mom and stepdad live in Arizona, and all of their neighbors pretty much are all ex-Californians, and they got lots of stories to tell.
Yeah.
But anyway, I met up with Ed, and he invited me up, and I actually took a flight up and came up and did a visit around Alaska. He showed me around down around where he lived, which was down in the Anchorage and area, and we went down on the Kenai Peninsula and up through the Matsu Valley, and got to see the Matanuska Glacier, and got to see some salmon in the river, and yeah, that kind of set the hook for me. So I ended up going back, and I ended up volunteering to come to Alaska, and shortly thereafter, I got an assignment up here. So
And
I've
as they
been
say,
here.
the rest was history, right?
Yeah, I've been here since 1987, and this is home now.
So how about tell me how you got interested in POTA, because we were talking about that before we started recording. Tell me about that. How did you stumble upon POTA, and what hooked you?
Well, originally it was the National Parks on the Air program that the American Radio Relay League ended up sponsoring, which was a year-long program, and that ended up kind of just seeming interesting to me. And I've been a DXer for years, and I found that being able to hunt people in parks was like trying to work DX. You know, you need a good antenna, and you can hear the weak signals and be able to do well. And everybody needs and wants Alaska. So that kind of got me into trying to chase parks for that year. I found out that retirement was a superpower, and back then I didn't have it because I was actually kind of trying to compete with November Lima 7 Victor. Paul was big into it, but he was retired, so he was on a lot more. So there was no way I could actually keep up with him. So he was the number one hunter that year for Alaska, and I was number two, and that has stayed that way even after, because he got on when POTA came along and it got resurrected as the program that we have now. He got on it and got going on it, and I didn't. I went a couple of years, and I didn't really get involved again until was it 2022, I think? 2021. Okay. Yeah, sometime in 2021. I had been hearing people on the bands, but I just hadn't got really re-engaged or hooked on it again. I was hearing Paul do it, and Paul is like a mile from me, so he's hard to miss when he's on. We end up hearing each other quite a bit because of the signal strength, because we're like 5'9" plus 60. It's it's extreme, and it causes us problems, and I'm sure that we both end up cussing each other at times because we're trying to hear weak stuff, and we blow each other's eardrums out, especially on some of the stuff on CW. But anyway, the thing that kind of really hooked me in again in 2021 was I was tuning around, and I heard this guy on operating, and he was having fun, and I figured I'd give him a call, and it was KJ6ER, Greg down in
Our friend Greg,
California
yeah, our friend Greg,
and
yeah.
in San Jose. So anyway, he encouraged me to get going on it, and help set the hook again, and after that it's been on. So I was kind of taking a little bit of thinking about some of this stuff last night in preparation for this, and I started looking at like the years of my activity level, and it's just kind of climbed up. Like back in 2021, I was still working, so I couldn't be on all the time. But I kind of just set a goal for myself. I'd try to work at least 10 parks a day, and then I just kind of ramped it up from there. And as I ended up getting more time, and when we started working from home, I had more availability to get on. Because there's times when it's just it's we've got all this technology to be able to show us what we're missing now, because we've got the internet, we've got all the spotting networks showing people that are on and all that. And I would be sitting at work looking at some of that. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't miss this. So it's like I'd say, okay, I gotta take lunch. I'm gonna run home, and I gotta drive 20 minutes to get home so I can hopefully get that contact in the log. But a lot of times, of course, that 20 minutes, that's a make or break. With a lot of the parks, people leave before I got home, so I'd be really upset about that. So eventually, I ended up getting a remote set up where I could operate remote. I didn't really get that going while I was still working, but afterwards I did. I don't miss as much now because now I can operate from wherever I got a computer or my phone. So I've operated now from all over the place. I've been spending a lot of time outside of Alaska the last several years because we got some estate stuff. My wife's folks passed away and been dealing with stuff in Texas a lot, and I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have the remote control capability. It was definitely would have been horrible to be having to go cold turkey and not be able to do my normal operating.
So
Uh,
does your remote setup also control your beam and your rotator?
yes.
Perfect. That's the way you want it, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, because you can't really. It's really hard, I can do a lot of stuff if I just point it in one direction. I can get a lot of the stateside stuff. But it really hurts being able to work you guys because where you're located, I need to turn my antenna because you're a lot farther north than most of the other lower 48 stuff, for the angle from here. And it's difficult to be able to actually work everybody with with having it in just in one direction. I did have like this last winter, my rotor went on the fritz on me, and I was gone, and I couldn't change it out until I got back. And then when I got back, it was just is too cold, so it was stuck in one direction, and it was kind of mostly on the main US. It really makes a difference on the weaker signals. Like there's a couple of guys that are QRP that operate out of California, and there's a lot of times I just couldn't hear them because I needed to turn the antenna more towards them, and it was off the edge, and it didn't have quite as much gain, so I couldn't hear them as well. And then anybody in Europe, I couldn't work anybody in Europe because it was just turned the wrong way. And same thing for Asia and such. So unless it was a particularly really strong signal, which usually out of the parks it's not for the DX. Yeah, it's pretty much ends up shooting you in the foot. So, yeah, I'm a big proponent of having a big directional antenna because it definitely will make or break most of the results. Because I work a lot of people that there's just no way that I would be able to do it without having the gain and being able to turn the antenna at them.
Yeah, and you always, and every time I hear you, either if you're working me or not, you always have a good signal. I'll be chasing some parks, and I'll either be before or after you, and you always sound really good. And I think the longest haul we've had, I remember being in Orlando, Florida, and I was on I think I brought my BB7V with me on that trip, and I had it up two or three sections of these camouflage tent poles.
Yeah.
So it was up maybe three. So I had it up 12 feet in the air at the base, was up 12 feet in the air. And of course, that thing's huge, monster vertical, I think 25 feet or 22 feet fully extended. And I was working this park in Orlando, and you called me. And I went, "Wow, I just got Alaska from Florida, like totally crisscrossed across the whole continent." I was shocked that you were hearing me on that vertical first, and it was great. And now you've worked me numerous times, and of course here on the East Coast, lots of times. So you always have a great signal. But on that note, Mike, being up north, and I know how northern latitudes affect HF propagation. What are some of the challenges that you have, operating up there when it comes to propagation. I talked to Jerry, VE8 GER, who's over just pretty much on just across the mountains from you in Northwest Territories, and he said he may go days or weeks without hearing a single signal.
Yeah, he's worse off because he's farther north. I'm about 100 miles south of the Arctic Circle, but yeah, we've got what we call the high latitude curse for everybody up that lives close to the pole. It's not going to make any difference north or south, but as you get closer to the pole, the geomagnetic disturbances affect things more. So the farther north you are and the closer to the pole, the worse that gets. So, like on days when I've got marginal conditions and can barely hear some signals coming through, he's going to probably just be dead where he's not going to hear anything. But there's days when we're like that too. So, yeah, I used to brag to people when I was living down in stateside that I could get on the air anytime, any place, and be able to work people. And I got up here and found out that's not true anymore. There's times when it doesn't matter what you got. You can have full legal power, gain antenna, and you're still not going to be able to be hearing or be heard by anybody. And it's crazy sometimes. It's not always reciprocal. We like to think a lot of times that the signals are going to be equal both ways. And I find that's not true sometimes, especially on those crappy days. There's times when I'm running 1200 watts and I'm getting a lesser signal report than the guy in the park. I'm giving him a 5.3 and he's giving me a 2.2 and I'm running an amp and I got enough power where I should be making the difference and it's just not working. So
Yeah, the guys in the southern latitudes don't know how well off they are because I complain here in New Brunswick where I am, and we're probably half the distance between the southern states and the northern and where I am, and I complain about sometimes where these guys in the states are working all these Australians and Europeans, and I said I can't hear a peep,
yeah,
and I'm not really all that. There's parts of Maine that are further north than I am. So I'm not all that far north,
yeah. And
and I'm complaining.
people take it for granted and assume things are the same. And a lot of people that come up here for vacation and such, they just don't realize that it's a different game up here. And part of it too is the distance. Everything is DX. So that makes it a little bit more of a challenge. You can't get away with the same crap antenna and the QRP that you're used to doing fine with down there.
Yeah,
It's just not gonna you're not gonna have the same results and you're gonna be disappointed. You're gonna be sitting there calling CQ until you wear your voice out and there's not gonna be hardly anybody hears you.
yeah. But
So
you'll be lucky to get your 10 contacts, right?
yeah, well, you could be on there for hours trying to get 10 contacts and only get three. So, and when the conditions get bad, that's all out the door anyway. It doesn't matter how good antenna you got and how good your power level is. Because I've been out when I've been activating out places where all of a sudden, blip, we got a coronal mass ejection or some kind of geomagnetic storm comes and things were great. I was working people and got decent signals, and then all of a sudden it's just somebody flipped a switch and now it's just gone. I,
Yeah,
I went out one time, was out at a park, and I was, I don't know, 100 miles from here, something like that, and out in the middle of nowhere. And I've got a lot of tenacity. I do not give up easily. So I usually will try to go with whatever's happening and just try to work through it. I have the rig in the vehicle and it's not a mobile rig. It's typically when I'm up here in Alaska, I'm using the ICOM 756 Pro 2. So it's kind of the predecessor of the 7300. So it's got the memories in it. So I don't have to call CQ with my voice all the time. I can just press a button, which I really love because there's times like that where you need it. I called CQ on every band for like 8 hours, and I didn't get anybody.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it just wasn't working. And then
Yeah.
eventually it started recovering, and I finally started getting some. And then it came back eventually. So I got my activation in before the end of the day by the skin of my teeth, because it came I was like, please just let it just let me get enough to get 10 in before the end of the day.
Oh, especially driving 100 miles, right?
Yeah, but I was trying to do a rove another time, and that same kind of thing bit me, where I had poor conditions for part of it, and part of it too was I couldn't get spotted. Nobody knew I was there. And if you're not spotted, you're invisible. So that's one of those things that has changed in radio. People used to tune around and listen around on the bands and turn the dial with the VFO and sit there and listen to see who is on, and people just don't do that
Oh no,
anymore.
everything's cat control, point and click now, right?
Yep, and people are only going off what's on the spot page. So if you're not on the DX cluster or on the POTA spot page, you don't exist.
Yeah.
And I did actually have one guy that showed up and answered me, and but he was an old guy and didn't have the internet and couldn't do anything to help spot me. So, so he's still doing the old ways, but he wasn't good for anything for
It's
for
it's funny
helping.
though because I will often call CQ on 20 meters around this time of the evening, and point my beam to Europe because for some reason this time of year Europe comes in in the evening, but it doesn't come in at all during the day. And I will have people, I won't even spot myself, and I'll get a pileup. But it depends how the band conditions are, right? And people got all these nice scopes now on their rigs. They can see the blip. This guy from New Brunswick with 20 over 9. They tuned down to it and work me. But yeah, I mean, I understand the challenge you have. Not New Brunswick is not that far north when you look at a map. It's far enough north, but when I lived in Alberta, I was a lot further north than I am now, and yeah, I know exactly the challenges with HF radio because we sometimes would get them there as well. I told you the story about going up to northern British Columbia, and it was a challenge sometimes even in northern British Columbia, which is still not as far north as you are. So it was interesting. I think people down south really don't know how well they have it. And I have a friend of mine who subscribes to this channel but lives in southern Chile, and often says he has the same problems that you experience
Yep.
from southern Chile. Exact same thing, but just the other side of the world.
Yep, because whatever's happening on the North Pole is happening at the South Pole. So, it's not going to make any difference which one you're on, but you're going to have the same kind of effects.
And the Bouvet Island expedition really drove that nail home to me that here's these guys. Yeah, some say, oh, there's a mountain in the way from North America. But they were far south, and we worked them, but I would get a five. I mean, in a D expedition, I think everybody gets a 5.9. But so he would give me a five. He would give me a 5.9, and he was maybe a 5.1, but still copyable. But yeah, the exact same things happen the other way. So I'm happy that you mentioned people coming up to Alaska because there's one group right now. I think I saw them spotted this morning in Yukon, and I'm scratching my head, Mike. I'm going, why are you on that band? Why are you on 40 meters in the middle of the Yukon, right? Get up high, get up in those higher bands. At least 20 meters. Try 17.
Well,
Maybe maybe 15's not open yet, but try. They're
part of
hang out on 40 meters.
part of it is habit, because they're used to operating on 40 meters where they're from, and they're not realizing, okay, they've put a lot of distance from any population. And the band isn't going to act the same up in the middle of nowhere as it does when you're in a populated area. Because like 40 meters works great if you're somewhere where there's people. But up here, you can use it at night, but during the daytime, it's about useless because there's nobody to talk to within the range that you're going to get with it. Whereas
Yeah.
if you were down in the lower 48 someplace, or in Canada where there's a population base, 40 is great. And when I'm operating in a different state, I'll use 40. but up here I don't normally because it's not gonna pay off unless it's really late.
I can't hear most activations on 40 here during the day. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll get one or two. But when the sun comes up, that band goes away for me.
But it's kind of interesting.
It's a great nighttime band for DX. Don't get me wrong. I'll work the world on DX. I worked Australia the other day on 40 meters in the first thing in the morning, right at Gray Line. During the day, forget it. That's a whole argument for another day because I scratch my head on why these guys hang out on 40 meters during the day going, come on, guys. I'm a DXer. Maybe they're not. I always say, you mentioned it. Maybe they like to work their, they like to work Bob in New Jersey, right? Because that's his buddy, right? And I know a lot of them aren't DXers. They're casual POTA operators who just like to work all their buddies close by, and they get that luxury in the lower 48 where up here, even in New Brunswick, we don't have a big population across the Maritimes. We don't have a very big population base, and Maine is not very doesn't have a big population base. So yeah, we can go on 40 meters and call CQ for an hour and not get a single person because Envis,
Yeah.
and the Envis may be working, but there's nobody there to hear it.
I think part of it is a lot of times people are they're ingrained in whatever habit pattern that they've had success and they just think it's going to work anywhere.
Anyway, my question was though, all these people start, I call it the Alaskan invasion, right? All the Southerners start coming up to Alaska in the
Yeah, and
summertime.
it's happening right now. We
Yeah,
just lost our snow, and I like yesterday I was out and there's just tons of people with travel trailers and motorhomes all showing up now.
yeah. And we have the same thing out here. They all flock to the Maritimes, and you'll see all the U.S. calls with their Stroke Victor Echo 9s, and I say, "Come on up, spend all your money up here. We have no problem. Just don't make it home. Go home
Yeah,
go home when you're done."
yeah.
But what tips can you share with somebody who's coming up to Alaska who wants to do POTA? What advice can you give them?
Wow. Um, get
Watch
an
out for the
antenna.
big mosquitoes.
Get it. Well, there's that. I can tell you some stories about that. Um, get an antenna that's got a good low radiation angle that's efficient and as big as you can for
And
whatever you're going to do
Any
because
of the KJ60R design should work well.
yep. Yeah, so I'm big on using verticals. A dipole will work too if you can get it up in the air, but you need to have the thing up in the air half wavelength. So if you're going to be running 20, don't be putting your antenna up 10 feet and think it's going to do you good. Sometimes the guys like me that's got big antennas can still hear you, but you're going to do yourself a disservice for getting a decent amount of contacts in the log because a lot of people just aren't going to hear you. The radiation angles make a big difference, and how high you put your antenna makes a big difference on that. And I think, you're talking about people doing things that don't make any sense, but a lot of people just don't have the experience. They don't have the training. They don't understand how a lot of the stuff works. And I guess maybe I've got a little bit of an advantage there because I got training when I was in the military and I always was a buff on antennas anyway. So just about every antenna book that's been published, I've probably got 90% of them because I've always been interested in that. And it's like, how does this work? How would that be to build this? What can I do in different situations? Because I was doing I did a rod support and going out back when the hams were supporting that before using satellite comms for it, and would go out in places, and it's like how can I get a better signal out? So I started doing stuff like make a two element Yagi that's a cloud burner, point straight up in the air on 75 meters, 40 meters, same thing. Yeah, so anyway, I got a lot of stuff rattling around in my head, and I don't have to go very far to be able to grab a book. I got a couple of them right here that within arm's length. I got like three of them over there and a couple of them over here are just antenna books because periodically I'm sitting there just looking at antenna designs and thinking about, okay, what can I do here? What can I do there? I haven't played too much of that into POTA because I've been pretty much just using as long of a vertical as I can get to be able to have it be as efficient as possible. So normally I'm trying to run a quarter wavelength vertical with some radials or on the vehicle, using the vehicle for a ground plane to get a decent enough signal out. Because I'm not really wanting to do a lot of setup and tear down. And part of that is because what you mentioned, the mosquitoes. A lot of places, the mosquitoes are just horrid. So I don't want to have to be outside doing stuff. And when I've been traveling, I found that, just being able to just hurry up and stick the telescopic whip on it and stick it up and down, that's about the amount of effort I would like to do. I appreciate the guys that are willing to go and build this big mast and put something up in the air and spend a half hour set up and tear down, but that's just not me
Yeah.
nowadays.
We have the same problem here with the mosquitoes here, but now it's getting into mosquito season. I was out in the yard this morning just cleaning up some leaves that I didn't take care of last fall, and they were about, yeah, I don't know, I would say they're about a half inch thick, maybe an inch thick now. And the one we've had a lot of rain here, so the ones on the bottom are just wet, like soaking wet. And of course, you get in there with the rake and you're raking them up, and now, of course, now you're disturbing the mosquitoes that are nesting in there, and they're just bombarding you. Um, this time of year, well, it's starting to get into mosquito season here, and I've started carrying this picnic shelter with me that we used to take camping, and I put that up, and I put my around a picnic table, or I put my little table and chair in there, and I don't do rows anymore, Mike, because I just find I just don't like going somewhere and doing 10 contacts and going to. I want to set up something and I want to be there for the whole day. I want to relax, maybe bring a thermos of coffee, something. Bring the dog and he has fun, and I just like to go and set up for the day and just sit there, be comfortable. So and bring a half decent antenna with me. That takes a little bit of time to set. I This year for POTA for me, I'm using Salty Walt's book and some of Greg's designs, and I'm building them like on a Wednesday. Tomorrow's antenna building day for me, so I'll build an antenna on Wednesday, test it here in the house on Thursday, and then whatever day is nice over the weekend, I'll go somewhere and set it up at a community park. I don't even go to a POTA park somewhere. Just go to a community park and set it up and test it in the field, and I'll repeat that cycle next week. I echo what you say. Antenna efficiency, especially where you are, that's going to make or break your activation. If you're going up there to that you're going to say, I'm going to go activate all these parks when I'm up there, and you get disappointed because you don't have the right antenna, and it's not, you're not getting contact because you think you can do the same on a hand stick in the Yukon or in Alaska that you can do in Oklahoma or Missouri.
Yeah, I've got some of those. I've got some they're not really ham sticks. I think I got one maybe of the old ham sticks, but mostly I've got some 10 Tech resonators from back in the day, and I've got a Hustler setup, and I don't normally use any of that because it's just too inefficient.
Doesn't work for you. What about locations? Because I mean, Alaska, from everything I've seen and read, and I have a good friend of mine who I haven't talked to on the air in a long time, Kilo Lima 7 Kilo Kilo. He used
Oh,
to, yeah, he used to join our Japan net on 20 meters. 'Cause we couldn't hear him on 40, but we'd hear him on 20. We point our beams
yeah.
up that way, and
Yeah, I know Jim real well. We're
yeah,
friends and
he was telling me Alaska's got all these beautiful places to go and visit, and I'm sure you got your wildlife areas and your national parks and your state parks. What advice could you give to somebody who wants to go up here just from a park perspective? What should they know when they go up to Alaska?
well, you're not going to have internet service in most places that they're out remote. The places around where the population centers are, you'll have internet and cell service, but you go to a lot of the nice, majestic places that are out in the boonies, and you got nothing. So your your phone is not going to work for you, and you're not going to unless you got the newer stuff that's got a satellite texting feature or something like that, or you got a uh,
Does Starlink work up there?
yes, but I'm not sure how well. I don't have one. I know there are some people using the Starlink minis now. And I have considered maybe if I'm going to be going out doing a bunch more remote stuff that may not be a
I
bad way
I
to
I,
go.
ha-
But
I have I have one for when I go really really remote, just for safety purposes.
But from what I'm hearing from some of the other guys at the Ham Club the other night is now the satellites are getting saturated. So, which is what I told everybody was going to happen. It's like, because I was in telecom, it's like I told everybody, yeah, everybody's going to be happy with that until there's too many people using it, and then it's not going to work right anymore. And so anyway, I don't know if they're going to expand and add some more uh
More
satellites to be able to make.
more potential space junk.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to do that or not. I haven't been keeping up with that. So I don't really know for sure what their plans are. But anyway, that should be an alternative that would be usable here. But I haven't been out enough and
What about from just from a general safety perspective? You know, I mean, imagine like every other remote state like Maine would have the same problem. Alaska. I mean, what about wildlife? Because I'm sure wildlife galore, right?
yeah, but it's kind of dicey on whether you're going to actually see anything that's going to be dangerous or not. That, there are the possibilities that there could be bear, and it depends on where you're at too. Um, so if you're gonna be out hiking and doing stuff like that, then I'd say have a good 44 Magnum.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
You got some people out there say, yeah, bear spray. It's like, well, you're gonna be the one that's gonna take a pause and check which way the wind's blowing,
Yeah,
because
the 44 would be the only thing that probably could take down a bear too.
yeah, there's a couple other calibers you could use. You could probably, if you
Yeah.
use a
What about from just
shotgun.
getting there? Like, I mean, you're not going to be going there in your rent. You're probably not going to be able to go there in a rental car. Like, you're going to need at least a truck or something to get to some of these locations that are a little bit out of the way, right?
Well, it kind of depends. Most of the roads to most places are usable with a vehicle that's not four-wheel drive. But if you're going to try to go to some weird places, then but you can get four-wheel drive rental vehicles. There's a lot of trucks and stuff you can rent
Hmm.
up here, but um, you can get into trouble, and I almost got myself into trouble a couple of times trying to find places and going off the beaten path, trying to find a park and not not really knowing where I was going. And it's like, it looks like it's down this way, and it actually I should have turned left to the last crossroads and end up out in middle of nothingness.
Yeah.
And it's
And of course, the GPS on the phone is useless by that point.
oh yeah, it's no good for anything. Um, and a lot of stuff too is, a lot of the maps, they're not really set up for out in the wilderness. And you touched on that with one of your other guests where you were talking about doing stuff out in the boonies and having that not work. And that, um, yeah, the technology's it's limited.
So
It's
my recommendation, if you're not familiar with going into the backwoods or the back country as we call it here, just operate from your state park that you're camping at probably.
Yeah, yeah. If you want to go out and you really want to do some exploring and get out in the way, you just got to make sure you take stuff. You need food and water, and that's going to be the big things.
A shotgun and a sat phone.
Yeah, and a lot of people that go out, they either use in reach devices where you can actually do texting over satellite, and those work pretty much anywhere in Alaska, or the sat phone. The I don't know. I haven't been keeping up with that, but it used to be that the Iridium system had sat phones that worked pretty much anywhere.
Yeah,
But I
perfect.
know a lot of our guys that worked at the company that I used to work for had Iridium devices, and also the inReaches to be able to let people know what's going on. Because there's just a lot of places you just, even if you're on like just driving the haul road up north, there are just a lot of places where there may not be any signal. And
Yeah,
it
it's
does,
not like you're in a congested urban environment. You're
right.
as they say, what Alaska, the last frontier, right?
Yeah, and it's like this in a lot of places in Alaska. Um, uh, it's not the end of the world, but you can see it from here.
Yeah,
And
yeah, pretty
and
much.
it's and it's one of those things that you can be where there's population, but it only takes driving 10 miles, and now you're out in the middle of nowhere and there's nothing,
Yeah.
where there's not hardly anybody. So if
Same,
you're out,
same
if
here.
you're
Same here in New Brunswick. That's the way it is here.
yeah, so you can't always depend on having somebody coming by to help you. And if you're on the main roads, eventually somebody will. But if you go off, like if you're trying to go dink around in some wilderness area for going to do park activation somewhere, it's very easy to be able to get off the beaten path enough where there may not be anybody to be
for
seen
for days.
for many hours. Or yeah,
Yeah.
I don't in the summertime here, it's not going to be too bad. It's more like in the early spring and the fall, there's not going to be anybody. But like usually here in Alaska, there's going to be people coming, and there'll be somebody coming along. So if you can get back to the main road, you'll end up having somebody come by.
Yeah. So basically, if I hear you right, Mike, again, if you're coming up to Alaska, basically understand how HF propagation works. First off, right? Know what bands to be on, what time of day. Have I would say, a very efficient antenna. Either one of the KJ60R models of the Performer, the Challenger, or something equivalent like that. A good vertical antenna with a low radiation, low angle takeoff, or get a dipole up in the air. For many, 10 meters on 20 meters is a long way up. I know the DX Commander pole will do 10 meters, but that thing is very flimsy at the top. So by the time it
Yeah.
curves over, you're not really 10 meters, you're about 9. But, I was going to tell you, I was thinking about this. The other day, I was at one of our local parks here. I had, this Goo Tech. I bought it from Amazon. It was a Chinese model, DP200. And I've got it all on video, and I'm going to edit it up one of these days. And I was somehow the wind has shifted the direction of the dipole. It was only up 15 feet in the air. It wasn't very high. And it was one of those V ones where I had it up on a V.
Hmm.
And so the wind shifted it a little bit because I had it oriented for 60 degrees to go to Europe. And it shifted it to more like 90, 95. And I'm calling CQ, and I'm having a good run. And I get this Yankee Bravo station call me. And
Woohoo!
I'm thinking, that's Indonesia. He's got to be getting me long path. So just a good, efficient antenna makes a difference big time when you're doing park. Even if you're in the lower 48 states or in Canada or up north, always have a good. I mean, build them yourself if you don't want to spend the money, or buy one. But there's a lot. Mike, don't get me started on all the all the YouTube talking heads that are pimping the latest garbage out there. Do your homework, understanding your antenna theory, and build something or buy something that's going to work for you. But so good antenna, understanding HF propagation, know where you're going. Have a plan. Let somebody know what your plan is. So if something happens, they say, "Hey, Bob was going to go here today. We haven't heard from Bob in several hours." At least they know where to go start looking for Bob, right?
Yeah, I've been bad about that. I was listening to one of your other interviews where you guys were talking about that, and I was sitting there thinking, yeah. I I probably need to be better about that, because a lot of
That
times I've gone out where, I decided at the last minute I'm going to make a left turn instead of going straight. So I was kind of
yeah, that was
going
that
one
was
way, and then I thought, I'm gonna go try to activate these other parks out this direction. But then as soon as I made that left turn, I got about 15 minutes, and now I got no service.
Yeah, that was
So it's
Gary. I was talking to VA3 Golf Hotel Bravo, and who was up in Alaska a couple years ago. Uh, he
actually
was he
he
was out
was
doing a
right.
big rove. He's been doing a big rove in Ontario right now. So
Yeah, he was up here. So
yeah, yep. He
with
went up there
John.
with a few. He went up there with a few others.
Yep, I
Yeah,
worked him and got
yeah.
to work him
I
at a couple of the parks that I normally operate for
I
him.
I worked I worked them as well, and no problem. Every day he was out, I heard them, all of them out there. And then some people will go out there and I never hear them at all, like nothing, not even a peep. The VY ones today. I brought my beam around and I had to bang onto the Yukon. Like I even took the park latitude and longitude and punched it in my computer and find out the exact beam heading. not a peep, not even a whisper in the band. But the bands were very very poor today. It was a day for going out that the propagation was so bad. I probably would have just stayed home and not gone out. But so, hey, Michael, I always ask this question when we're wrapping up here. Where do you see, from an Alaskan perspective, where do you see ham radio going in the next few years? So, you see any significant changes? What do you see that's going to make the hobby better? What can we do as hams to make it better?
Well, I think for one thing, it's a technical hobby, but it's also a people hobby. So I look at it like this is a lot more about relationships than just numbers in a log. If we end up establishing more relationships with each other and have fun along the way, that goes a long way towards helping other people to have fun with it too. So I can talk about where things are going with the hobby. I'm not a digital guy, and one of the big trends has been a lot of stuff's going digital, and we're getting more technology involved in doing the contacts and such, and using the computer. And I'm okay with people if they want to do that. I'm not going to run it down, but on the other hand, it's taken a lot of the person to person out of it, which I don't like. Um,
Yeah, but if you understand,
so
I mean, I have employed several millennials and younger over my vast career, and none of them really had any real people skills. So I think the digital world of ham radio fits them perfectly because they grew up like that with texting. I remember telling one young lady one time, says, just pick up the phone and call the customer. Have a conversation. And she started bawling and like shaking and hysterically. I go, wait a
she's
second.
horrified.
She never talked to anybody on the phone in her life. It's always been texting. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think the digital world fits perfectly for them. Old guys like us who like to have a little bit of a rag chew sometimes. We're a little bit more. I think we're a little bit more comfortable to it. And I was actually talking to. I haven't done the video yet, but I was talking to a young ham who, big de-expedition person at the age of 23, done numerous de-expeditions, and her comment to me was, CW is gaining momentum in the younger hams because they come from a digital world where they don't like talking to people, but they'll get on CW and have a blast with CW. It's just weird how things come around in full circle.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. And there's people that are extroverts and people that are introverts, and they're dealing with the world and each other. And some people are just not they're not comfortable being in groups and around people, and the way they're wired, it kind of sucks the energy out of them. Whereas you got guys that they get energy from being around other people
Mhm.
and want to have interaction and talking, and
Yep.
that it's way people wired makes a difference. But I'm encouraged that Parks on the Air has come about, because I think it's great, because it's getting a lot more people out of the shack and out of their house and getting out into the outdoors and into the environment.
Traveling
And
up to Alaska.
yeah, well, a lot of people would do that anyway,
Yeah.
but there have been a couple people like Greg, WD6 UCK. Uh, he came up and did a trip just to be able to get Alaska in checked
As,
off on
as,
his
as an
worked all
activator. Yeah.
states
Yeah.
for as an activator, and so there are going to be people that are going to be doing that. And for a lot of people, I've had a lot of people that I talk to on the air, and it's like, it's on my bucket list. I want to come to Alaska. I've always wanted to come and see, and then I tell people, it's like, okay, well, make it happen.
What's the
Just
what's the
just
what's the
just 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 make sure you have plenty of time. Don't be trying to do it in a couple of days, because
No, it's a
Alaska's
big
big.
plague, big place. What's the local 2 meter FM scene like? There's a busy on. I know there used to be a net that when I first got back on the air, and before I got my HF radio hooked up, all I had was, Echo Link and IROP, and there was an Alaska morning that was on Echolink or one of the Echolink or ILP every day, and I used to check in on it. And there was more people from not from Alaska than were on from Alaska. But what is the local repeater scene like? Is it pretty busy there, or is it just there when people want to use it?
It's there when people want to use it, and it's not real busy. So that's one of the things that's kind of odd about Alaska is just people just aren't as engaging on 2 meters and yakking with people. And I had a guy, I heard a visitor one time on the repeater, and I got on there and had a chat with him, somebody up visiting during the summertime, and uh, actually had one of the other hams called me on the phone and said, "Thank you for getting on there and talking to them." And I was thinking, it's pretty weird and bizarre that that is a noteworthy thing. But but that was one of the things that was weird about coming to Alaska that was like that is like people just aren't getting on VHF like other places that I had been. You know, you could go just about any place with 2 meters down lower 48, throw your call out there, and if you're somebody that they don't recognize, somebody will come on and talk to you.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen that much up here. Somebody will get on and say that they're monitoring, and there just won't be hardly anybody out there that's going to do it. And there's not that many people listening, and I don't know. They're just not as outgoing for stuff like that as a lot of other places I've lived.
So I'm going to ask you this final question, and we have very limited time, so we're running low on time, so we're going to keep it short. I think I know your answer to this question, though. I think, Mike, when you leave Alaska, you have to surrender your Kilo Lima 7 call, or your Alpha Lima 7, or your November Lima 7. I way too many times I get excited to work a Kilo Lima 7 and find out they're in North Carolina.
Oh boy, you're hitting a pet peeve of a bunch of us. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that the FCC did with the deregulation, letting people keep their call sign when they're in different DXCCs. That is no bueno, and yeah, that's
Well,
not.
it works, and it works the
I
same with
don't
the
agree
Kilo.
with it.
It works the same with the Kilo hotels and the Alpha hotels as well. They have the
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly, and we hear them all on there now. There's Hawaiians and Alaskans and people from Guam and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. You
See,
know,
in Can and see,
they're all there's people all over using those call signs, and they want to keep their call because they like the
the
extra
the
couple
notoriety of
dB
it, right?
gain.
Yeah,
Well, that and a couple extra dB gain of punching through pileups with them because
yeah,
people think that you're getting that entity, and then they find out that they've been snookered.
yeah.
So yeah, we call them spoofers up here, or I do, because
See, in Canada, it doesn't. I mean, that's why it perplexes me. In Canada, it doesn't work that way.
yeah, you
If
you move, you have to change your call.
now only the only stipulation is I have to have a mailing address. So technically, I was planning to go to Alberta this summer to visit family. I could go to the our equivalent to the FCC and say, "Hey, I got an address in Alberta. It's a mailing address. I would like to get a VE6 call and pay my $60, whatever the fee is, and I can have a Victor Echo 6 call." Will I do it? Probably not. But in Canada, you can't leave New Brunswick being your primary residence. If I moved to Ontario, I would have to get a VE3.
Right.
That's just the way it works here.
And that makes sense. And it's chaos here in the United States now because they've let this go. And now, I got people calling me and I'll hear this whiskey two calling me and I'm going like, "Wow, I got propagation to New York?" No, it's somebody in Arizona or California or
Yeah.
Washington. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
when I'm working, if I'm looking at the cluster and I see, hey, a Kilo Lima or Kilo 1 just worked Japan on 20 meters to find out they're in California. I go, geez,
Yeah, it's
I just stopped looking at it now.
Yeah, it's kind of ruined it. It's made it a real mess, and it's chaos. And
Yeah.
that's one of those things that it was just bad. It was a bad decision, and
You can, and
unfortunately, and I know people that used to live here and are living in Florida and still kept their Alaska call,
yeah, it's
and
too late. It's too late now to go back.
and Georgia and Washington and Arizona.
Yeah, it's too late. Too late now to undo it, right? So,
Texas.
Yep. Anyways, Mike, hey, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate first of all, I appreciate your friendship. Appreciate you giving me a call whenever propagation is open between New Brunswick and Alaska, which is, quite a bit sometimes, right? So
2 more contacts and we'll hit 50.
is that what it is? Two more
I
to
looked
go?
at I looked it up last night. Yep.
There we go. So I try to get out at least once a week now. So and this time of year I'll be out, around this time. I usually try to wrap up about a half an hour before sunset. So around this time of year, I'm usually wrapping up around now, which is almost 8 o'clock, so I can get home in time because I hate driving in the dark, especially with all the deer and moose around here. It's just hate driving in the dark. And in the summertime, as we get closer to the summer equinox in about a month or so, I could be out to 9:30 and still have daylight. So 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So, I'll be out in the evenings or first thing in the morning because I want to catch that European DX before everything closes down for the day.
I'm
But
asleep.
yeah, it's well, that'll be like if I'm out at 6 o'clock in the morning, that's 1 o'clock in the morning for you. So you're fast asleep. Unless you're
Oh,
chasing that rare DX in the middle of the
I
night.
I may still be on. I may be working parks in Europe.
There you go. Mike, thanks again for doing this, my friend. Always a pleasure. And I'm sure we'll catch up in the near future here.
Okay, and here's my antenna for
There you
everybody
go.
that
What
works
is
me
that
all the
log?
time.
Is that a log periodic?
Yep, Tenadyne.
Yeah, I thought I recognized it.
Yeah,
V
Tenadyne
VE9
T12.
VE9MY has something similar. I don't think he has the T12, but he has something similar to that. Anyway, Mike, thanks again for doing this, everyone. I'm Stuart, Victor Echo 9, Charlie Foxtrot. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you guys down the log, as they say. See y'all later.
Thanks, Stuart. Blessings.